The hill church at Wether's End had no electric light, only stone that drank the afternoon and rows of empty pews diminishing into a smudged nave. I went because the rural chapter asked for an inventory before winter, and because I preferred the long walk from the station to another hour of courteous argument in a room that smelled of biscuits and minutes. Fog had been hanging in the lane since morning. Not rain, only a drifting veil that narrowed the hedgerows into charcoal strokes against a sky that refused to brighten. Past the parish lych-gate, the path rose. My boots counted the ridges where roots had prized the slabs. Thresholds accumulate meaning if you insist on noticing them. I lingered one breath before the south door, as if politely asking leave to cross. Inside, chill climbed from flags older than any doctrine I trusted. Layers of varnish on the benches caught what little illumination came through clerestory glass filmed with dust. The nave read as corridors of deepening tone, brightest near the aisle, swallowed at the arcade. Beside the sacristy hatch, a horn lantern waited on an iron peg, soot-rimmed crown to foot. I slid the panel, scraped a lucifer across the striker, and eased the chimney down until flame nested in smoke-thinned gut. Warmth belonged only to what the lantern chose to touch. A coin of wavering definition on tessellated stones, fraying at the perimeter into the general dark. Holding it low, I went on into the narrower works of the church, where hymnals kept their edges and hymn numbers stayed fixed on tiny hooks like insects pinned for study. The vestry smelled of damp paper and extinguished vigil. Drawer after drawer surrendered keys tied with rotting twine, spare cassocks, moth-frayed linens, driven by the half-irrational itch of clerical thoroughness, or perhaps by the feeling that omission would be remarked upon. I lifted the padded kneeler from the prie-dieu cupboard. Beneath lay a calf-bound diary, swollen with moisture yet legible enough to offend conscience with confession. The handwriting belonged to Edmund Hale, incumbent here in 1871, according to ink on the flyleaf. A name I recalled from plaques, too scrubbed by brass polish to mourn anyone properly. Entries narrowed as the drought summer wore on. Hale wrote of wakes held without rain, fields scored by dry fissures, and finally of midsummer supper at the keeper's lodge, taken before a hearth wherein embers persisted like stubborn pupils. Someone had vowed, Hale recorded, against what he coyly termed
the hollow custom.
And afterward the oath sat in the diary's middle pages like sediment. I turned leaves with the tips of cold fingers that did not feel entirely my own. The lantern swayed slightly on its ring, tossing soft nets up the plaster. The nearer I came to Lammas Eve, the more frantic the script became. Cross-hatched cancellations and margins crowded with cramped afterthoughts. On the appointed night, he admitted he carried a clasp knife.
For kindness only.
Pressed for the ritual slit that would sanctify. Not kill, he pleaded to the margins. Mere blood enough to redden mortar that had thirsted 80 lean years. The final entry was not prose but ledger lines. Hearth, 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 scratched until the nib caught and split. Beneath those marks the paper tore in a razor edge disguised by ink. Glass scored my thumb open when I jerked sideways. Warmth followed, thin and unmistakable. And with it rose a gust from the grill that led down to the crawl space under the nave, laden with soot and ash-strewn grit that tasted of old cold. For a stunned instant, the lantern's halo shrank until I occupied only disc and ache, blood hitting the flagged floor in hesitant beads that spread into a blot I could outline with my ruined thumb, as if verifying a stranger's confession. Someone had scratched the underside of my boot where I stood. Not possible, surely, unless I rocked like a sleeper. Yet coarse grit scraped there when I stooped afterward, traced in lines too straight for careless mud. Above, the arches held their sooty silence, while the lantern steadied itself on its hook as I had hung it moments before. I counted my breath until I matched the ache in my palm, folded the bloody page against my handkerchief despite the visceral slick, and retraced my steps through narrowing grey. Fog met me at the lych-gate, thinner than virtue. The hoof path home showed only as a tonal drop between hawthorn masses. I ought to write to the deanery. Instead, I tucked the diary into my coat and walked on, listening for any second gate that might match mine. None sounded, only wind worrying the dormant hedges. But the wound throbbed in clean rhythm against linen, insisting that some thresholds do not forgive return unmarked.